Hey, aloha ina kākou. Welcome to the 8th Kale Mao Center for Sustainable Island Food Systems Brown Bag Speaker Series event addressing food system planning and policy in Hawaii. My name is Ioane, and on behalf of the center, I want to mahalo all of our guests and presenters for taking the time to attend today. Please scan the QR code in the bottom left corner of the current slide to see previous events that we've hosted through one of our partners' web pages, Transforming Hawaii's Food System Together. And stay tuned for the recording of this event, which will be posted and sent out to all registered guests within a few days. I'm also going to be posting links in the chat to access that page, along with some of our panelists' relevant content during the presentations. So this speaker series is just one of the projects that we're working on here at the Kale Mao Center, which is an initiative within the UH system, co-directed by both Dr. Albie Miles and Dr. Noah Lincoln. One of our main objectives is to collaborate with folks at UH and across the entire food systems landscape in Hawaii to highlight the work being done by different individuals and organizations to improve our local food system. This includes addressing topics such as food security, justice and equity within the food system, ecological sustainability, and food system policy. Oftentimes, this work is being conducted without much outside visibility, so we're here trying to make connections by building and maintaining these important relationships and sharing the work being done by individuals and organizations with the people who it significantly affects. Overall, we just want to better identify what the university can do to support and improve food systems transformation in Hawaii. So in addition to hosting events like this, Kale Mao Center has been established to engage in a number of activities to include research, data collection, education, community engagement, policy analysis, and other monitoring activities. The intention here is really to create and maintain the social, intellectual, economic, and political spaces that we feel are necessary in order to drive systemic change in a forward direction for the food system in Hawaii to better measure and realize our food sustainability goals. Many of these materials will be available as soon as we finish building on our website, which I'm very happy to say will be done within the next few days. So please be on the lookout in your email inboxes as we grow and continue to share all of our resources and materials. So a few housekeeping items. All of our audience interaction is limited to the Q&A feature that's within the Zoom platform. So please feel free to write your questions as they occur to you. And any questions not addressed by our presenters within the allotted time can be answered via email from our panelists after the event's conclusion. So our guest today will be discussing food systems policy issues relating to farmland ownership by foreigners and corporations, as well as advances being made in state-level food systems planning. So I'm very excited to introduce our panelists. Today, we're welcoming the statewide food systems coordinator for the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, Amanda Shaw, and Hawaii State House Representative of District 46, Amy Perruso. So without further ado, why don't you take it, Amanda?
Mahalo, Ioane. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. It was great to be together in December, and so wonderful to kick off January talking about food systems as well. I think as soon as, yeah, your screen is done sharing, I'll pop over some slides. But really, yeah, I'm Amanda Shaw. I wanted to just introduce myself. I call the Hunananiho area of Waimanalo my home, which is where I was raised, and spent several years, outside of Hawaii doing different economic development work with an emphasis on the social side. And the more, that we looked at different value chains, the more I saw how important food systems are, not only to, what was happening every day in our communities, but to our economy as well. So I'm excited that I'm taking on this role housed within the Department of Agriculture as a statewide food systems coordinator. I'll share a little bit of background there, and then want to share about some of the work we've been doing and the priorities, and then hopefully get into some conversation with folks via the chat function on what your priorities and interests are in this area. So just, yeah, I provided a little background about myself, but as I said, this is work that has been coming together for some time now. It's housed within the Department of Agriculture. Folks in the philanthropic community had come together and had been asking questions around how we can really help increase local production, improve food access. And I think when we were all, the folks that on this Zoom that were able to attend the Food Summit saw those issues highlighted, just very much so, with new reports talking about increased food insecurity that folks are facing, 1/3 of households facing food insecurity. We have a lot of work to do together to improve access as well as support local ag production. So when we're thinking about this work, it has a big name with statewide food systems coordination, but really, folks have been doing this work as we saw beautifully. I keep highlighting the summit because it's always such an incredible gathering and examples of the kind of work that communities across the Hawaiʻi are doing on food systems. So there's just been so much incredible work and just really want to acknowledge that and the K.O. Miles Center and folks at Transforming Hawaii Food Systems for really doing a lot of work to think about the policy sphere and what we need to do to reach our goals. So I think these will be familiar to a lot of folks. We have these incredible ambitions, aspirations. We also have legal mandates that we're trying to reach. And so it really is an effort of everybody to try to get there. And I think the questions, again, as we were saying, the folks that came together to support this work, we're asking questions I'm sure other folks have had, which we've been talking about, is what are the specific plans to help us reach some of these goals? And so we hope that part of what we are offering is support for that. How this all came together was there was a letter from Governor Green that came, in response to what the philanthropic community had brought together in terms of resources, and really asked the statewide food systems coordination role to tackle 5 areas. And they're quite big. Some are more on activity level, and others are things that we know a bunch of folks have been active in trying to help, make happen. So, talking about community engagement, thanks K.O. Miles Center for helping us do that. Pursuing federal resources for local food and agriculture systems. Lots of good work has been happening in that area. Addressing key infrastructural barriers. So those are really all the things. We hear a lot about different issues that farmers are facing trying to get the local food and innovation up and going. Institutional procurement, farm to school, farm to state. That's a big area. And then supporting policy initiatives that arise. So really the aims with the statewide food systems coordination team is to help increase the interagency coordination there. And that's kind of how this piece, we hope the piece that we're bringing is really that about the increased cooperation and coordination. When we look specifically through the different goals, we'll highlight just some of what we've been active doing recently, and then, look forward to having more conversation. But we've, in terms of engaging agricultural communities, that's kind of been the work that I've been involved with most recently over the last several years, is supporting farmers to access federal funding. And so hearing a lot about the everyday struggles. And so we want to continue to hear from folks directly what's happening on the agricultural side, as well as for food access, players and folks trying to access that food. So we've launched the initiative. We've been doing a lot of listening and kind of getting to know what folks' priorities are. We'll be doing monthly update calls. So I'll share some more info at the end about those, just so you can hear what we're doing and we can hear, back from you folks and hear questions. And we'll also have, we've had feedback sessions kind of on the key policies and priorities. So we're happy to be together in December at the Food Summit. And then we're also at the Ag Conference sharing a bit about a working group that I'll say a little bit more about in a second. In terms of pursuing federal resources, we know folks have been really strengthening those relationships, with the congressional delegation, with USDA, with national policymakers. And so we're kind of highlighting the need to maintain that, to continue those relationships. Obviously, lots of big changes there, but still really important that we advocate for what Hawaii needs, what makes our needs here unique in terms of our food systems. We really need to just keep advocating there. We're also excited that, HDOA has got a grant writer, for example, and so new work to bring in resources, as well as an ag finance group that we've been running through the nonprofit I've been involved with. So we've got a group of folks out there that have been doing a lot to leverage federal resources and more, not just federal, but other kinds of money and capital to really bring those funding streams together. And so we want to continue that work to work collaboratively, help leverage philanthropic resources as well. Yeah. Key infrastructure barriers, we know these are many, and we, as part of a resolution and a working group that I'll go into and have some slides on, but we were able to bring together a group of agencies that were named to help tackle and look at some of the key actions that folks want to do over the next 2025, 2026 period and beyond, to look at what are these issues, how can we really specify, what's happening in terms of land access, what are the needs around, water, infrastructure, other pieces. And so that's how we're kind of playing a role there to help identify through research, but also through coordination, hearing from different agencies what the opportunities are, and action groups to really, not just talk, not just research, but actually try to make some change. Advancing institutional procurement. So there's an active area that's happening around the farm to school, farm to state, projects and proposals. And so we really want to support in that area by helping identify what some of the challenges are and opportunities for rule change, as well as advancing opportunities for, purchasing local food for other entities beyond the Department of Education. So we're in conversation and doing a lot of listening to hear what the work has been done, because there's been so much incredible work done over the last, many years by folks to make that a reality for students in our schools to be able to eat local food. So listening and hoping to contribute through research and opportunities for coordination. And then around policy initiatives and priorities, I'll share a bit about some of those. So a bill has been introduced by Senator Gabbard. We hope there will also be a companion in the House, currently SB 1186, that looks at institutionalizing this food systems process. So the process of doing the coordination, which we've been able to start up. But we'd really like to institutionalize that and see that investment come through so that we can continue and actually take this even further. So I'll share a little bit about what we have done in a minute, but just to say that this has kind of been the beginning, and the not exactly pilot stage, but the very early stages. And so we know that there's much more we can do, a lot of good work to build on, a lot of dots to connect between state level things as well as county and community level types of planning. So as will be part of, working with Department of Ag and many others, some of the Hawaii State Farm Bill process that's come through that organization. Those are there. You can see the kind of 2025 priorities for the Farm Bill that have to do with getting, information that is needed through ag statistics, looking to improve capital shared with farmers. Of course, biosecurity is a major issue, as well as ag crimes. And so those are kind of listed what, have been termed the State Farm Bill, the Hawaii State Farm Bill, but we know that there's lots of other bills and policy priorities that are bubbling up beyond the Department of Ag's priorities that are listed there. So whether it's ADC or other organizations, we're keeping our eyes out and trying to follow what's going on there and share what we can. So in terms of the work that we've kind of been involved with in the, the lead up to the last food summit, that part of the year, as well as going forward, there was a resolution that, asked the Department of Ag and DBED to co-chair a working group on sustainable food systems. So we were able to help with backbone coordination there. And that was really to develop an interagency food systems plan and to create a report that was submitted to the legislature. So that report is available on the Department of Ag's website. And you can see kind of where we were able to take that. So as an unfunded mandate, we definitely had some challenges trying to pull folks together, but we were really excited that we could, start from a place of understanding, the named agencies and organizations there, which are just, a slice. We know the community and the food system stakeholders are much larger than just that group. But through the connections and relationships folks have, trying to get a sense of what are on the agency plates in particular for 2025, 2026, and how can, deepening the work that they already do together really enhance that and really start building us up to a place where we're ready to take on a larger statewide food systems planning process, coordination process, coordinate with, again, the counties and the food access coordinators there, as well as community, smaller community-based food systems work. So that's kind of part of that. In terms of the framework and the priorities itself, there is a link that I'll share once I'm POW presenting, and you folks can take a look. But they really look at those areas there. The state level food systems governance has become this priority to get a process institutionalized, so to get some appropriations and have a statewide food systems planning and coordination process. Again, it's also looking at the data and information. Very hard to kind of understand what's happening in the food system without some of those key building blocks and some of the baseline. Really, continuing to deepen the work on biosecurity and invasive species management. We just see that time and again for farmers and others in the state that's just such a huge priority. Looking at land, water, and infrastructure. I think I have a little slide about this, but one of the main takeaways from the coordination framework is an action group looking at land, water, and infrastructure. And so we've started that pilot with the Ag Finance Hui, which is a group of lenders as well as technical service providers. It's open to anybody that has an interest in financing the ag system. And so they're piloting an ag, or we are piloting an ag access, a land access group, to take a hard look at some of the issues that have been coming up for the farmers that a lot of us have been in contact with. So kind of building that process to then be able to say, to look at what are the key land access issues, how does that relate to access to water, as well as infrastructure, and to build on that to make some changes where needed. And then similarly with institutional purchasing and value-added infrastructure, really engaging with that ongoing body of work. And our hope is to increase and contribute to connectivity between the amazing ecosystem of farmers and agriculturalists out there that have been doing that work, as well as really large projects that are up and coming and have a lot of momentum. So that's kind of where we, again, you can take a look at that report that gives you that sense of where those are. So just in terms of next steps, we're engaging with the legislative session, trying to understand what different, priorities are, whether it's on the food access side or on the production side. We'll be continuing to coordinate that working group. It does have a lifespan. The resolution has it sunsetting in June, but we're hopeful as we engage that we'll be able to continue that work. Piloting the land access group, as I spoke about, and then really mapping and listening around institutional purchasing, just being really aware that there's a lot of active work there happening. And so just, want to stay plugged in. And then monthly update calls. So if you're interested in those, please, I'll have my email at the end. You can email me and I'll send you the link. Some questions I have for folks, I'm sure you've got your own. I've seen like some of them might be coming from what I'm seeing in the Zoom, but just, we want to know what your priorities are for the food system. Please do share those. Please continue to share those. Emails always available. Just reach out. We'd also love to know what you're excited about, what the bright spots are. And we saw a lot of them on, that came to the Food Summit, Ioane and others, and it was beautiful to see that. But we also know there's grave concerns. There's a lot we still have to do together. And so we're hoping to play a part in that collective work. You can take a look at these are some QR codes. Not sure how well that works for all the folks on Zoom, but hopefully you're able to access. You can share your feedback. The first one's a link related to kind of more the food systems planning priorities. And that was kind of from our process that was ongoing around the report. And again, we're hoping that if we're successful, we can continue that and get resources. And then the Department of Ag is issuing a newsletter as well that has updates on the Farm Bill and some of those pieces. We'll let you know when important things are coming up to testify on, which I'm sure Amy will share a lot about the legislative process. So just want to thank everyone for joining and taking some time around your lunch break, and for the center for having us. And I'll leave that up there. I'll put my contact info in the chat as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. What a great presentation. I think it really sets the stage well for Amy to come into and discuss the things that she was looking to address here today. And if you could please send me the links for the QR code things that you had, and then I'll distribute that out through the chat while Amy's presenting, so we can make sure folks get engaged in all of that. Thank you.
Aloha.
Amy?
And Amanda, thank you so much for your work. I'm just so grateful that you're in that position. And You're well prepared to do this. I think it's a massive undertaking to bring together all these different pieces, and to be really systematic about it, but at the same time, really grounding it in community. So really grateful for your work in this area. I'm going to focus my comments just on the legislation I'm introducing around ag and food systems. And there are I would say two big buckets. And um, while I've been on the ag committee for multiple terms, actually my whole time in office, and I served as vice chair, I think that my personal background in agriculture and in subsistence ag gives me a particular lens, but also my experience as a teacher. So I was a teacher at Mililani High School when we went through the Ainopono project. So our students were doing waste audits, and they were creating, school focused and generated menus, and the energy on campus was palpable, and that forever changed me, because I saw that it is absolutely possible to do farm to school in a really robust and inspiring way. And we actually saved money. So if folks read the Ainopono report, I'm hoping that you'll see that there's a narrative that, doing farm to school costs more, and that those kinds of assertions were completely debunked by the actual pilot. So I encourage folks to look into the evidence and do some of your own research. So again, going back to this session, I am really motivated by the issues that the community has brought to me. My community stretches from Waipio Acres. It extends over to Kunia, includes all of the bases in central Oahu, includes Launani Valley, Wahiawa, Whitmore Village, then stretches out to Waialua and Mokuleia. So all the way out to Kaena Point. So there are massive swaths of really important ag land and conservation land in my district. And there is increasing anxiety around protecting these lands, in particular prime agricultural lands, but also places that are culturally important. And the first bill I want to talk about, it really is meant to speak to that concern about what is happening in my district, and that is speculation of ag land. So it's happening in a couple different ways. So I have different bills to address different mechanisms that are being used. And so the first is foreign ownership of land. And this is something that foreign ownership of ag land is banned or strictly limited in at least 24 states. And most of that conversation on the continent has to do with security issues. And I guess in the sense that I'm concerned about food security, that is one of my motivations. I am hesitant though, to really enter into this conversation around this kind of bill in the same way that it's been introduced in the past, and because it can have xenophobic overtones or undertones, and the issue is not the origin of the folks who are buying the land. The issue is that when people are purchasing these properties and holding them, and sometimes holding them and just then turning around and flipping them, we have less control over what's happening on those lands if they are foreign owners. So there's more extraction of profit, and oftentimes the crops that are grown in these lands, I'm thinking in particular of some lands being leased by foreign companies to foreign GMO companies that belong to ADC, that are producing crops that will never feed anybody. And we also see that in my district. But the main concern is folks coming in and using ag land for simply to turn a profit. So whether it's speculation, so flipping the land, or creating kind of false sense of, or, you know, using tourism, using agritourism, and using a thin veneer of agriculture to kind of legitimize what they're doing. We have one property owner in my district from Canada, the main developer of Whistler, who wants to reproduce Whistler essentially in my district. And so he has already gotten permits to build gondolas on Mount Ka'ala, and has gotten permits to build a restaurant at the top of Mount Ka'ala on ag lands. So, and under the guise or the rubric of agritourism. So, I think that we're doing a couple of things with our legislation. One is to more strictly and carefully define agritourism, so that it is predominantly about the production of food. And then the second is banning or strictly limiting foreign ownership of ag lands. And then the third is instituting a conveyance tax surcharge that will also limit the speculative uses of ag land. So what happens is developers will buy this ag land with the expectation that they'll be able to change the zoning and build housing on those lands. And when they're unable to do that, the land has appreciated so in value. So when they then sell it, they still make a profit. So it's a no loss situation for them. And I think that to limit or disincentivize that practice, imposing an additional surcharge on the conveyance tax for those parties is entirely fair and reasonable. The second bucket of legislation I want to talk about just briefly goes back to the farm to school work. And I have also been engaged in that for 10 years, as I mentioned, but we've had over the course of time and I see lots of folks in the chat or on the Zoom from my community, and some have been following this farm to school, farm to state activity. And for me, it's really important because it speaks to an effort to create a more circular economy. So I think that farm to state and farm to school kind of falls within farm to state, has the capacity to keep more of our wealth here circulating in our economy and have less wealth extracted. And that a lot of my other work is also focused on that. So ending tax haven abuse and so on. I'm really focused on taxes. But going back to the farm to school stuff, two bills, one going really focusing on the procurement. So requiring the department to use locally produced foods in their procurement processes, and right now they are allowed to already. They have been since I started. They don't need any special exemptions, but they operate very differently from the Office of Procurement. So they have their own procurement staff. And so those folks just need to be kind of rule guided, law guided to act in ways that prioritize locally produced foods. And then the second bill is, I would say, an effort to speak to discomfort that my community feels around the centralization of the school production kitchen. So as many people on this call know, in Whitmore Village, they're building a centralized kitchen that is the size of the Aina Haina Costco, and which is a massive footprint for a tiny little village that has one road in and one road out, and is already really difficult to navigate ingress and egress. It's very frustrating already for the community members just because NC Tams is already there. So there's community conversation around this centralized kitchen. And in response to that, what I'm proposing is that we move towards a hybrid approach to this meal production. And I know that there are many parties who are adopting like the Zippies model. And I frankly think that the fresher the food is when it gets to kids, the more nutritious it'll be. And I think that it might be okay to use a facility like that to pre-prep foods and then cook them in the school production kitchens, of which we already have 250. They need to be upgraded, some of them, and some of them are in better shape than others. And then the cafeteria staff need to be trained to do more scratch cooking. But I really am hoping that we can move towards a hybrid model where we incorporate some centralized facilities, but then also use what we have, reinvest in taking care of what we already have, which is our schools. And we already have our people who work in our schools, and those community members are very important to me. Most of the community members who work in our school cafeterias live in my community, live in my district. And I saw how the cafeteria workers responded when they pivoted to scratch cooking at Mililani High School, and it was extraordinarily empowering. And the level of excitement and gratification for those workers was real and infectious, actually. So that's something that I think really helped the morale of the school, and also just the fact that food is cooking at a school, like you can smell it, it feels, there's a creation of a sense of feeling like home, and it's an act of love, and I want my community to have that relationship on their school campuses, to be giving and sharing, you know, through food, that kind of reciprocal affection. So those are like, that's what I'm working on right now. I want to keep my comments brief so that we can move to questions, but yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Gonna move straight into questions because it looks like they're coming in and they're pretty extensive questions. So I want to get time to answer them on this forum. So the first one comes from Joe Ramos, and his question is, does the focus on the food system state level shift with the new administration and the Republican Project 2025? And if so, what are the areas we need to look into policy-wise? Did you want to address that one, Amy?
So I would say, right now, we haven't really been having conversations, although we should have been having conversations around the potential impact of a new administration, in multiple areas. And I think the consensus was that we would have more time and that this would be a slower process of transition. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to see the impacts almost immediately. And in terms of food policy, I think that Amanda will also be able to speak to this, but my sense is that some of the nutrition guidelines might be moved back. I'm not really sure what the ramifications might be, and it is an area of concern for me.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think all I can add is just that, you know, we want to continue to, you know, make trips to USDA in particular and other spaces so that we can understand what the priorities are and feed information back to the community here so that we know how to best advocate and maintain the resources that we can, especially for the farmers through the Farm Bill. But yeah, lots of still unfolding, I think, and trying to understand that will be important for us.
I will say that what has been very clear, at least at the narrative level, is this conversation around the Department of Education, and a strong desire expressed by the new administration to eliminate that department. That department distributes Title I funds. So it's really important to understand that our school system is basically segregated. So we have private schools, we have the most robust private school system in the country, because of the history of Hawaii and all that that entails. And our public schools are mostly teaching Native Hawaiian students, Filipino students, Micronesian students, and students who come from middle-class working families, or who are living in high poverty contexts. So 51% of our schools are Title I schools. So that means that the majority of our schools benefit from free and reduced lunch, benefit from the support of the federal government through Department of Education. So if those funds are cut, we're looking at a real impact on food, this really crucial part of our food system, feeding our kids in ways that we will have a hard time at the state level because of recent stuff we've done with our tax system. We will have a hard time making up that difference. So, and that's just one area that impacts, you know, the relationship between supporting the most vulnerable and you know, what might be happening with the new federal administration. But that's a great question.
Yeah, it's
Way to start us off.
thank you, Joe. All right, our next question comes in talking about regarding the farm bill, regarding the bill restricting foreign ownership of agricultural land. Is there an established department or system in place to evaluate the current use of ag land? Specifically, how are cases handled where individuals purchase ag land, plant a couple of fruit trees, and then classify it as ag activity, such as in Waialua? I think this addresses like the gentleman farms, things like that. Looks like you're going on that one, Amy.
Yeah. So, you know, honestly, I'm really grateful for the recent work of the council. And they have been working on Bill 64, I believe, which councilwoman or member Kia Aina has been really active in kind of looking at our land uses, our land use ordinances and laws, and you know, creating a clear understanding of how we can regulate and what are appropriate regulations for these types of lands. And there has been a really robust conversation around appropriate uses and how to designate something as ag land, and then a whole additional conversation around important ag lands. I think that the Department of Ag is in no way prepared to engage in this kind of regulation. So it really falls to the counties, in my view, to kind of enforce existing land use ordinances and laws. And maybe Amanda can add on to that because, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add, but thanks.
I think that that's actually a source of a lot of frustration. Like that question exactly kind of captures what's happening in my community, that there are so many uses of ag land that the community objects to. You know, like multi-generational residents are seeing what's happening to lands that are putatively ag lands, and they're enjoying, so the owners of those lands are enjoying lower tax rates, right? Which, if they're going to be building houses and building other kinds of structures that are not directly related to agriculture, then that seems to be unfair. And then we've also had kind of this renegade developer who purchased hundreds of acres on the North Shore and then promised people, he sold promises basically in ag land, and he told them that he would CPR the land, and they all paid half of the money. And he said, when I get the necessary infrastructure in and we get the CPR done, then you can pay me the other half, and you will be the owner of that property, or like you will have ownership interest in that CPR. Because he never in 12 years engaged in any of the CPR work or put in any of the infrastructure. Now, all of those folks have put in, many of them, their life savings, and are only tenants in common. So it's exactly that kind of behavior and activity that makes people in my district so upset, because these folks had good intentions, like they want to farm, and they, the whole situation has left them kind of in a bad, in a bad way. So I sometimes I think that my district is a little bit like the Wild Wild West. So going back to that question about regulation.
Mahalo, Amy. And we have more questions rolling in. I'm going to summarize this large question a little bit, just discussing large agribusiness taking advantage of our environment to produce GM seeds, and this being a large agricultural export in Hawaii. This question is kind of acknowledging how it's posing these health risks and risking Hawaii's biodiversity, environmental impacts, and then affecting our conventional and organic ag production here. So due to these companies using all of this land, making it more difficult for sustainable community food system farmers to break into being able to contribute. As you're discussing, Amy, how do we prevent these out-of-state foreign interests from abusing Hawaiian land for profit and engaging in reclaiming land from foreign entities that are currently holding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the bill that I'm introducing is part of it, but it's not the entirety of the conversation, because we also need to pass better laws around pesticide use and land use. So on one hand, we need to check speculative practices so that lands can become more affordable for local farmers. I have a lot of former students who want nothing else than to get into farming, and they just need a pathway. They need access to capital, but most importantly, land and water infrastructure support. They need support. And when the land prices are skyrocketing, it makes it that much more difficult for them. But on the other hand, we are not passing any legislation in this body. The entire time I've been here, I've around pesticides, and the entire time I've been in this body, I've been introducing legislation, and it goes nowhere. And for me, it's especially disturbing because Central Oahu experiences extraordinary use of pesticides, far more than most areas in California. And I think that we're definitely not doing our job protecting our communities if we're allowing this kind of pesticide use to continue. And I'm really grateful that, I have colleagues now in the building who are also picking up those bills and introducing them and creating a wider space, a broader space for that conversation. In particular, Rep. Cochran has been really supportive of this work from Maui because she was really involved in this conversation there. And then Rep. Poi Poi from Molokai. And similarly, her community is also really concerned about this, as we all should be, I think. But we are fighting against very entrenched interests. So to make that kind of legislation a real part of the legislative agenda is going to require, I think, more community activity and really elevating the significance of that kind of change.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Kai Nakamura, for that question. Did you have anything to add to that, Amanda?
Thanks. Yeah, I can leave it there.
Okay. And aloha, Annie Frederick from HAPA is asking if you could include some bill numbers. Do you
Sure.
want to send those to me in the chat here? I'll post them out for everybody. Share that out, Amy.
Yeah, I can put them in the chat.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Banner Fanene. Fair shipping for non-contiguous areas act reintroducing to Congress by Rep. Ed Case. Thoughts, support, and effects on local ag.
So I think that, I I don't know. I think it's brand new legislation, and my understanding is that Representative Case has been really interested in repealing or dramatically changing the Jones Act for quite some time. And I think that this bill is part of that work. And I would have to look at the legislation. I haven't seen it. I just heard about it yesterday. And I think my concerns have a lot to do with biosecurity, frankly. We're already struggling with invasive species, and I would want more eyes, not fewer eyes, on what's coming into our ports. And I think also at the same time that we need to become far less dependent on imports. And that's part of like my work around food sovereignty. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that in a more robust way, but I haven't read the legislation yet. And hi, Banner.
I would just add, yeah, similar in terms of the specific legislation, but just thinking about the struggles that farmers in Hawaii are facing in terms of our own local shipping costs. That's something that, I'm really curious about, and know there's been some efforts to take a look at that, and that has been difficult. So I think, yeah, definitely transportation costs just being a huge barrier generally. So it'd be great for us to be able to work collectively to see what we can do.
Mahalo for that question too, Banner. I'm going to jump down to a question posed directly to Amanda really quick, just to make sure this gets out there for everyone. Does the bill you're spearheading include creating a position/program for institutional purchasing at a state or Hawaii Department of Agricultural level?
Thanks. Yeah, the bill that we've introduced has 3 positions. So it would be a coordinator position to do like the statewide food systems coordination, then a policy analyst position to help with kind of the policy dimensions, and then an administrator. So it doesn't necessarily have like a specific position that's dedicated to institutional purchasing, but that, as we've said, is part of, I think, the collective goals that we have, at the state level. And so we want to contribute to that. I think there's other conversations that are pretty live, and maybe Rep. Perruso can share about some other proposals that might be coming up around that.
I think the most interesting and important proposals are actually coming from the food systems, the transforming food systems folks. So we're on the same page.
Mahalo. Next question. What do you both feel is the #1 barrier to reaching the state and county's local food goals? And what barriers are there to agriculture being a viable activity for agribusiness owners who are intending to grow food for our communities?
I'll go first. I would say a lack of trust. Just in my experience, I've watched the Department of Education and farmers and this, very uneasy relationship develop over time. And the Department of Education has, on multiple occasions reneged on promises. They have not done the work necessary to build out future contracts, which give farmers like a sense of stability and confidence that, they can grow for a school menu. And I also feel that the Department of Education, they have lacked consistent leadership in this area. So and so that creates a lack of trust or some sense of instability or anxiety on the part of the parties, because when you have high turnover in these state institutions, then farmers who had been working with one person and had started to feel like, okay, this is possible. And then, there's different leadership or there's a restructuring, then farmers already have so much going on that it's not surprising to me that we are struggling with this question, because we are asking farmers to pivot away from producing primarily, let's say, for hotels or for grocery stores or for Costco to produce for our state institutions. And that pivot will require some commitments on their part and resources and reallocation of and rethinking their business plans. So it's a big ask. So I think that we need to be there with the support to build the trust.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like, depending on what goals one's looking at or just where you sit in the system, I think we could have, just lots of different barriers would come to mind. But I guess if I had to think broadly, kind of a little bit on the second question, but also thinking about food access, I mean, the cost really is something where I think across the board, whether you're producing food or accessing it, for producers, that's, about 40% higher than the continental to US prices. I think they're much higher in depending on what exactly you're looking at. So we really have to, approach that together and look at both sides, both the access as well as folks that are producing. But yeah, definitely different barriers depending on kind of what goal and where you sit in the system.
Mahalo for that question and those answers. Thank you. For Rep. Perruso, what does an ideal form of agritourism look like to you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. No tourism, all agriculture. I mean, I guess I'm okay with like a farm stand, but at the farm stand, you shouldn't be selling Cheetos. I'm thinking that you should be selling only foods that are grown on that property, or maybe on an adjacent property, or maybe on the surrounding properties. But I have a very proscribed kind of vision of what agritourism could and should look like, and it's not like hordes of tourists like traipsing through a property. And I want those lands to be used to grow food. So I mean, that might sound a little bit aggressive to some people, but yeah.
Amanda, do you have any thoughts on that question?
No, but I think, I've seen different examples of agritourism, so it seems really interesting to think about the different models. There's some places that base, how much agriculture and crops you're producing and providing to community, on terms of how much tourism infrastructure you can build out. So I guess generally I tend to think of both and that, we're thinking about different uses on land, whether it's housing or energy or agriculture. And we just, we need all of those things in different ways. So just to have the kind of the multiple approach. But yeah, it'd be great to hear some exciting and innovative ideas coming up for that.
Yeah, thank you. And regardless of whether the owners are foreign, from the US, continent, local, if a proper vetting and evaluation system isn't implemented, we'll probably end up in the same situation as we are now. More of a comment, but any input on that?
I would say that the big capital coming in is international. So multinational corporations, at least that's what we're seeing in our district, and really wealthy individuals. So I would think that if we can disincentivize the engagement of those particular organizations and individuals, at least make it more costly for them, then we have a better chance of having better outcomes, I think. Or I wouldn't be doing this work.
All right. Let's see here. I want to jump to this, expanding upon the agritourism question while we're on that thread still a little bit. Would activities like farm tours, educational activities, product sampling, and concurrence with farm growing activities be appropriate in your mind? Thank you for
Yeah,
that question.
totally. Like those are appropriate uses. I think I would just object to the building out of the infrastructure that looks something more like Disneyland than a farm, because what you're describing could be used in an application, in a permitting application, but then once it's manifested, you're like, how did this become a wedding site? So I think that it is about the authenticity of the intention. And I think on the face of it, those seem like totally legitimate activities.
So a lot of it's also just being creative with finding a way to solidify things so that loopholes can't be exploited. And
Right. And
yeah,
really having serious conversations and having state and county leadership that are kind of on the same page and are listening to the community. I think if they came and listened to, for example, the Ag Committee from our neighborhood board on the North Shore, or even to the North Shore neighborhood board meetings, we talk about this stuff all the time. So these are big issues for our community.
yeah. I'm gonna jump to, we have Annie Frederick from HAPA still asking for some of these bill numbers, and I promise we will get those to you and
I,
send them with the videos as well.
I put them in the chat. I responded to her. I typed an answer.
Oh, okay. Maybe I didn't get to see that. In any event, I'll still get them and put them out when
There.
I send this video.
I didn't hit submit.
Okay. Great. So final question, just in case we don't get to it though, I wanted to just expand on a couple of things. A lot of this always includes or involves rather folks in the community getting active in making their voices heard, right? And so that involves going to the Capitol, whether it be online or in person, creating an account, weighing in on these different bills, providing testimony. And so I just wanted to highlight there's stuff that's been put into the chat for going to create that account under Capitol site. I would highly recommend looking up Hawaii Food Plus policy to learn some of the basics, some of the 101 stuff on getting active in this, in this space. And I've also put up a link for HAPA to track different things that HAPA is discussing in community as well. And for the last 2 minutes, let's try to get this question answered from Derek Conselva. Why is our ag land being sold to townhomes developers?
Because we don't have any restrictions right now on and I would say like the developers that are coming in sometimes from the continent, but and sometimes they're international, but um we aren't asking people who are purchasing land what their intention is when they purchase. It's capitalism. It's a free market economy, and they can purchase with the intention of rezoning and the expectation of rezoning. And sometimes, you know, there we've seen examples where that has been successful. So maybe some of those expectations are reasonable, but I think that we should really hit the pause button and look at our remaining available ag lands and adopt some different legal practices that prioritize protection of those lands and the proper use of those lands for agricultural purposes.
Yeah, and just adding to that is, lots of complex issues, lots of different views on some of these pieces and the best ways forward. So just acknowledging that, not everybody agrees about all of these aspects, but just how much, I think there's a commitment from a lot of folks that care about the food system and agriculture locally to ensure that we do have adequate lands for the folks that are willing to do the really, really hard work of actually producing for us. So yeah, always carrying, their struggles and needs in our minds. Thanks.
Mahalo, and mahalo to our panelists and all of our guests today. Amanda, Amy, thank you so much for this was an amazing webinar. I'm just so blessed to have you folks visit and share all of this. And anything that didn't get addressed, please email me at kaomao@hawaii.edu. Thank you again so much. I'm going to send out all this stuff, and I will take the time to address anything that didn't get discussed today. If anybody has any questions or anything, please just feel free to email me. Be on the lookout. February 19th, we're discussing food as medicine. March 5th, we're talking about post-secondary food systems education and university system. And then in April on the 16th, we're discussing all the various food hubs around Hawaii and their functions. So yeah, be on the lookout for our website coming up soon. And thank you again so much, everybody. Aloha.
Thank you.
Thanks.